So let's go ahead and move on to the diplomacy because this is really important here. Okay, let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. Right now, as we speak, Zelensky had agreed to talks with Russia as the Putin invasion continues. It was going to be on the Pripyat River on the Belarusian border. So currently, that is actually happening right at this second. Now, what has happened is that the delegation by Ukraine is Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov and the MP David Arakhamia. I'm sorry, very, very sorry about the pronunciation of these names. He's the leader of the Zelensky party in the Ukrainian parliament. So those are the two chief representatives of the Ukrainian government. That being said, we should not have high hopes for a diplomatic solution at this point. The reason being that what President Zelensky had said is that, yeah, sure, we can meet, but I demand an immediate withdrawal of Russians from Ukraine and an immediate ceasefire with no preconditions. In effect, saying, no, I'm not going to resign, all of that. The Russians, though, floating a talk with zero preconditions does go to show you that militarily things are not working out. However, they have still continued to demand maximalist political aims, a total subjugation of Ukraine, not only subjugation, but an agreement that they will never host weapons up on their soil. That interpretation up to them in terms of what exactly that means. They are looking for a Belarusian client state in the state of Ukraine. And at this point, I don't see how Putin could possibly settle for any political settlement where Zelensky remains in power when he's so floated by the West, number one. Two, Zelensky is essentially pledged to fight to the death. He's requested fighters from the European Union. He's getting now lethal aid here from the United States. We're shipping him Stinger missiles. Sweden is apparently providing to get Sweden to provide you with anti-missiles is big.
You've really messed up then.
You screwed up. Finland is, is getting involved here. I mean, I have never seen Europe like this in my entire lifetime. I don't think it's existed at this state since 1940. I mean, it really is one of the most united area. Putin has accomplished the unbelievable goal of getting the Europeans to stop bickering and to try to do something, which itself is a maximalist political feat. But on the diplomacy side, too, we are watching very closely what's happening with China. China remains basically the only grand strategic ally that Russia has in this fight. So let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. And it's a fascinating look into actually how what's happened now with Russia's invasion of Ukraine is straining relations between Putin and Xi. And Xi Jinping actually has gone ahead and urged a diplomatic solution to the crisis. What's also interesting, Krystal, is that even though China continues to try to do kind of a both-sidism, which is that we wish to see a cessation of hostilities and a respect of territorial integrity, but that, of course, is up to debate, they are looking very closely and are not using the same language that they would with respect to Taiwan. And I think that this matters because what the Chinese are implying in their diplomatic statements is that Ukraine was a separate country and it did get invaded by Russia. Now, if the way they look at Taiwan is like, Taiwan's not a separate country, Taiwan is China, it just happens to be governed by a rebel government, we're gonna bring it home, so to speak. Their way that they would talk about it is you can't invade your own country, right? Whereas Putin is setting it up very differently, questioning the legitimacy of the Ukrainian state, period, but not in the same way. So whenever Xi Jinping is talking this way and the Chinese foreign ministry is putting out those statements, that is a tension. And the reason, too, is that it doesn't take a genius to see that Putin has united not only the entire West, something I want to emphasize before we even get to the economic part here. The Japanese central bank continues to also join the West in cutting Russia off from the global financial system. And actually, the largest import that Russia has are cars from Japan and South Korea. So those two Asian countries, obviously allied with the West, have now a united block of financial sanctions, not only from their largest trading partners in the West, but also in the East. So that has made it so that you've got an immense amount of political pressure from both sides of the globe on Russia. This matters for China because they do not want any of these economic consequences coming to their doors.
Yeah.
And if they were to continue to float Russia economically, they themselves could then invite sanctions which would cripple their economy. Not necessarily it would be the same ones, but there are all sorts of different ways that we've seen in the past where you can sanction a country which is buying oil from Iran, for example. We could see the same thing if they were purchasing Russian gas, purchasing Russian wheat. China has viewed this very much as, oh my gosh, Putin has invited the backlash of the entire world. We want an immediate end to this. So he does not even have somebody backing him at the foremost in his maximal political goals.
That's right. And this is really significant because the early signs from China were pretty bad.
Yes.
I mean, there was even some speculation that maybe they had kind of a secret deal and they sought immediately to sort of backstop the Russian wheat market, which matters a lot. But you're starting to get these little signs that all is not well in the China-Russia relationship. First of all, China abstained from a vote at the UN Security Council. Rather than voting against the resolution condemning this invasion, they abstained. Be better if they voted for the resolution.
Well, that's never going to happen.
That's not going to happen. So the fact that they abstained was significant. And then another little potential sign was it was actually right after Putin had a phone call with Xi Jinping that he agreed to the talks that are going on now. Now, we don't know what was said during that phone call. We don't know if those two things were related, but noteworthy that that phone call happens, and then that's when Russia shifts their positions, agreeing to meet with no preconditions with the Ukrainian delegation. And as you're pointing to, China really finds themselves in quite a bind here because, number one, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to just look out at the geopolitical landscape and say, do we really want our sort of sole ally to be what is now becoming a pariah state that is financially collapsing in real time? And we'll get to that in just a minute. But in addition to that, China has leaned heavily on this concept of sovereignty as a core part of their foreign policy, of their economic policy. This is a major part of their routine propaganda to their own population. It's part of the way that they, this is what they say to the U.S. of, number one, you don't have any moral legitimacy to complain about us when you violated national sovereignty in places like Iraq. Number two, how dare you tell us how to treat our Muslim Uyghur population because we're a sovereign nation and you don't get to meddle in our affairs. So that's been a core piece of their sort of propaganda and their orientation. So now when you have Russia so clearly violating the sovereignty of Ukraine, it puts them in a very difficult and tricky and uncomfortable position. So that could be why you're seeing some of these little steps away from Russia and not fully backing them up in the way that we initially feared that they would.
There's a lot of lessons for China in this. It's interesting. I was just looking at some military analysts who I trust. If you're the People's Liberation Army, you've never fought a general war since the Korean War. The current officers there are not even close to as trained as the Russian military officers who've been engaged in civil war, all of this. If the Russians are meeting this level of resistance in Ukraine, now you can see then, and having such catastrophic results, at least in the short term, you can see then that Ukraine and a committed military population, especially an island or a nation like that, which has backing from the West, can put up a pretty decent fight if given the chance. The PLA, there's no indication that they have even close to the same level of competency and would probably face the same level of backlash in Taiwan if they were to invade. So there's a lot of lessons here for China, which is that, look, you may not have direct military intervention, but the West, when united on these things, can make your life a living hell, as Russia is about to find out, and we're about to talk about that. And second, which is that if you have a committed adversary, well, you better be willing to fight to the literal death in order to make sure that that political goal can be accomplished, because these people are not going to give up so easy. So, it's an interesting, there's a lesson here for any time you try to conquer a small country. It may look like a cakewalk, but you will find out the same lesson that America did in Iraq. You break it, you buy it, and you will lose thousands of people, and you can have a massive domestic political civil war for generations to come. Yeah.
We're going to have Derek Thompson on later in the show because he's been interviewing a whole bunch of experts about all of the follow-on effects of this crisis. And one of the people that he talked to was discussing this Chinese relationship and how they would be evaluating this, because of one of my fears, one of, I think, a lot of people's fears, is that China would use this as an excuse and would sort of embolden them with regards to Taiwan. And at least the expert that Derek talked to said, on the contrary, I think they may be looking at this and seeing like this did not go all that well for Russia. And so they didn't think that this would actually, cause China to take bolder steps. And they also saw it as a possibility of even cooling what has been a love affair between China and Russia. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it, you get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.